so I sort of came into the history of sound, sort of wanting to make something that was about the other aspect of relationships, which is the sort of the connection. And for me, the kind of intimate moment is the next morning when Paul's character is going around his apartment and kind of absorbing all of his things. But it's the moment of sort of falling in love in some way. It's the certainty that this is somebody he's not going to be able to move beyond.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, two young men forge a relationship in the early 20th century in director Oliver Hermanus' romantic period drama, The History of Sound. The film tells the story of Lionel and David, who are determined to record the lives, voices, and music of American culture in the shadow of World War I. But as they travel the American countryside in search of music, the two find love with one another instead. In addition to The History of Sound, Hermanus' other directorial credits include the feature films Living, Mafi, and Shirley Adams, and episodes of the series Mary and George. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Hermanus spoke with director Mike Mills about filming The History of Sound. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Thanks everyone for staying for the Q&A. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me.
Do you want like a big philosophical question first or like a practical one?
I don't mind.
Which one?
We can go philosophy.
Philosophy? So what is it about your soul that like makes directing the right job?
It's an interesting one because I'm from South Africa. And so it was very much the fact that it was impossible. I was born during apartheid. It was affected my family, of course. It was like the impossibility of filmmaking. And my father would show us movies, most of them illegal, simple things like The Crying Game or The Rocky Horror Picture Show or Buried in the Garden. And I think it was something about, trying to do the impossible, some kind of, in the sense that I didn't think it would ever happen.
Yeah.
It was just dreaming. So that was like the aspect of me that wanted to do it, was just I wanted to keep dreaming.
Yeah.
And then miraculously the country changed and things worked out.
That's funny that you were drawn to something that felt impossible. That does feel very directing.
Yes. I think it's also like, I think the escapist factor of it, the idea of cinema in South Africa for a long time was that it was a way of seeing other societies and some sense of places that weren't as fractured as South Africa. And I sort of sensed that through my parents a lot. Yeah. And so it became like maybe I want to project and tell stories in this other place that isn't the place that we feel kind of forcibly kind of, badly treated.
That's fascinating. Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Pass that test. So practically this film is so beautiful and so like of itself. I felt like so in its river the whole time, like it was so cohesive and its own planet. How do you get that going in your head from the beginning? Like how do you build up what the film's going to feel like and be like and look like from the very beginning?
This particular movie, because it's a movie about this man's life and this key relationship, but it's also about music. And that was a really helpful thing to start from with this film, was the educating myself and being exposed to the music and the tone of that kind of music and the narrative of that music, the stories of the music. And the music is generally kind of depressing. The narratives are sort of, cautionary tales of lovers who die meters apart in a snowstorm, or murder ballads, or this, the quality to the narrative of the songs felt very like melancholic. And so I sort of wanted the movie to play as if it was a ballad of this nature, to try and generate this idea that it could be sung as a song, the story of these two men.
And then, like, but how do you work out in your mind, like, what the coverage is going to be like, or like
The coverage?
Yeah, because like I always stumps me. I'm like, how do you do this again every time? And what is this game? And I feel like I have to reinvent the wheel a little bit. Or do you have that at all? Or like
I sort of hate coverage.
Yeah.
It's particularly, I sort of, my version of pornography is to watch Gosford Park and watch the dinner scenes, and then just imagine how long they would have taken to shoot.
Yeah.
And then the continuity of the food.
Yeah.
And imagining like Maggie Smith just losing her patience.
Yeah.
I sort of read a script. I've done this in other films where you get to that day of shooting the dinner scene. You're like, oh, damn it. It's like, what are we going to do? It's just labor.
Yeah.
And you have the actor who was told very specifically not to eat lunch. And then they have eaten lunch, and now they're like, I had a film once where the husband had to aggressively eat pasta. He's sort of shouting at his wife, and he had eaten lunch, and so the actor was getting sick. And you can't. You've got to cover it. There's no. And so I sort of try to find ways of not avoiding coverage, but I like the idea sometimes of just finding a single way through something.
Right. But okay, not just coverage, but like just the look of the film, the frames, and all that. Like, how do you start to build that up?
I often find that it's sort of like going against. I did my two previous films I shot in 4:3, and I have a background in photography. When I didn't think I could make movies, I became a press photographer, and so I sort of work with the frame a lot, and I like the challenge of the 4:3 and 2 movies in a row. I sort of shot the first one, which was in South Africa, which was in the 80s. And then the second one was set in England in the 50s. And somehow I liked the fact that I was going to frame these two different places in the same size. Yeah. And then getting to this, I just felt the need I needed to go wider again. Yeah. So it's always like a revolt against what you've done before.
Yeah. The first shot is so beautiful. The river shot where you land on the kid.
Oh, thank you.
It's gorgeous entry. What was it like with Josh and Paul? Like, I'm envious.
I can't complain.
I wish they were better looking. It's like,
it's such this movie is sort of a story of me, Josh, and Paul, to be fair, because we all met during COVID lockdown. I was sent this book, short story, and I met the two of them, not about history of sound, but just to work together. And Paul had just done Normal People, which had come out during lockdown, and he was, his life was changing from his bedroom in London. Yeah. And then Paul was going to be in my previous film, Living, and then couldn't eventually. So we had this relationship for that. And Josh was determined to be in this movie. So that all happened very quickly. By the Thanksgiving of 2020, we had a screenplay and both of them. And then I went everywhere, and they were like, well, these are these two random TV stars. Mm-hmm. I don't think, nobody was interested in them at all.
The genius of capitalism.
Ridley Scott.
I often find when you have like multiple actors, and especially actors like them are so deeply talented, each person is like a completely different planet. And like this person benefits most from this kind of notes, and this person this kind of notes, and this person is great in the first 3 takes, and this person takes 10 takes. Like, was there anything like that with the two of them? It's such an intimate thing between the two of them.
I kind of love that though. Like, my job is to sort of adapt to whatever each of the actors need. Yeah. And then somehow try and make it not become tense or to not let, cause I don't know if you've had this where you can have an actor who requires a lot of attention and sort of that can suck you in for quite a while. And this is different. They actually took care of each other a lot. We shot Josh out because he had to go on a press tour. So it was quite interesting because we shot everything with Josh. And then Paul definitely felt the kind of missing of Josh and was slightly depressed for a while and fed in. But, I've never worked with somebody like Paul before. It was just so immediate and constant and free and instinctive and trusting. And he's an incredibly, incredibly smart person. So he does a lot of work.
Yeah. It seems like that. I can imagine that as I was watching it, like they're in a partnership together and making the film as well as the character and the story.
And because it took us so long to finance, because nobody thought they were famous
Because they were just so bad.
TV.
And yeah.
We all got to know each other. I was living in London. I was making a living, and they were doing different movies. And so we constantly sort of hung out, and I think they generally built a natural chemistry.
Yeah.
So by the time we started making History of Sound, we say this now, all three of us, there was a real positive side of the delay.
Yeah.
Was that I don't think naturally you get to spend that much time with your cast, like years of time planning and thinking and talking about the same screenplay.
Yeah.
It was a sort of wonderful benefit. It might be a way of working.
I've had that experience.
5-year contracts with you.
I've had that experience before. What was it like? I'm just curious. I always love asking this question. So you have a scene. You guys all show up on your interior of the cabin or whatever. How do you do it? Like, how do you block it out, or how do you start it, or is it different every time, or it's the nuts and bolts process? I'm sitting there with you. You're going to do a scene. How does it go?
So I don't do storyboards. I don't do shot lists.
Mm-hmm.
It's very frustrating for the DP. I will arrive on the day. I arrive very early.
Yeah.
I walk around on my own. It's in my head. I think about it. I also think about what we shot, like what's already been shot, right? Like how is it stylistically coming together? And then I'll make the plan in my head that morning, and then I'll walk the DP through it. And but every day is a new day.
Yeah. That's cool. I know I'm familiar with that process.
I mean, I will storyboard. I mean, I had to. I did a TV show where it was like a stag hunting sequence. Which is a combination of horses and VFX and stunt people. That I would storyboard. Yeah. But then I have the same problem because I'll have an idea that's not on the storyboard, and then you're trying to pivot the whole unit.
Yep. And then dealing with the actors with that, like, do you let them block it out, or like just like the nitty gritty nuts and bolts? Like how do you talk to them right before? How do you set up the scene with the actors and the camera?
I sort of just suggest to them like what I think. I mean, have you ever had it where an actor just goes, "No, I don't want to do that"? I've had that once with a very famous.
I've had that many more times than once.
I've only had it once where it was like a scene with like 7 or 8 people. Yeah, complicated, long, like 7 or 8 pages. Yeah, and I sort of blocked it out with all of them, working it out in my head, and the lead actor was like, "I don't want to do that." And then I don't know how you deal with that, but I sort of find that to be kind of annoying. So I was like, well, I don't see how. Do you have a better idea, or what is the reason why it doesn't work? And the actor didn't like the idea of walking toward a window and saying a line because they believed that was unnatural. Yeah. I'm like, well, we are making television, so if you don't move around, it gets really boring. Yeah. So you need to just keep moving around this room, and you have to find a way of charming. But I was annoyed enough that they actually came to my monitor 5 minutes later and were like, "I'm sorry, sometimes I think I'm the director."
I felt like watching the movie, it was such a beautiful... Do you know about avoidant attachment styles? No. Does anyone in the audience know what I'm talking about? It's like an emotional relationship thing where it's like, I feel like so many of the characters are like giving out a signal of love that doesn't get answered. Oh, yeah. So it's kind of like Paul left longing for Josh in the actual production of the film, right. And it kind of, I felt like the filmmaking kind of manifested that too, where it was like, it's always like someone looking for something from someone and then it doesn't come back. So Paul ends up meandering all over the world, essentially looking for the signal to bounce back. Right. And there's something very beautiful about the pacing of the film that kind of like let things unspool in that way, or like you kind of left waiting, or left with this like kind of longing feeling. Is that? Did you?
Yeah, it seems, this is my first film that I've made in the United States, and I've made most of my work in South Africa. And somehow when I was making South African work, the idea of the kind of long or languid or contemplative, slow kind of work was, and maybe it was in a foreign language, so it all seemed super interesting. And then to make a film in America, I guess, with movie stars and in English, somehow people noticed that more for some reason. It's becoming like it's sort of somehow not the package you're supposed to make. You're supposed to make these more high impact, but it's kind of just how I make movies, right? So, but I've noticed the difference between when it's in Afrikaans in South Africa and it's the same pace.
Yeah. No one brings it up.
They're like, well, it's so artistic.
Yeah. Everyone's down.
Yeah.
I know. When I show my films in like Northern Europe, everyone's like, great.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
There is like a regional kind of aspect to it, but there was something that, there's a mood that I wanted to create, this idea of the longing, and that felt like it needed its own time.
Yeah. I also felt like everyone you met in this story was dealing with their own traumas and how the traumas played out in their relationships with different people.
It's quite a great thing. But in the early part of the film, Josh says to Paul, everyone is going to die. And then we kind of watch his parents die. And there's the relationship between all the deaths that Paul's character, Lionel, goes through. And, for example, a scene like where he comes back home, his mother has died, and he's cleaning the house. It was something that we thought was really interesting because it was Lionel has this thing where he sort of does these acts of cleaning or physical labor as part of his childhood, but he also does the acts of cleaning as some kind of like, I don't know, sort of self-flagellation of some kind.
Oh, really?
There's a scene later on where he visits Josh's widow.
Yeah.
And he cleans the kitchen, does the dishes. And so this is like something that just Paul and I were like, okay, this is who this guy is.
Yeah.
And so when he comes home and his mother's dead and he feels all this guilt, he's just going to like bizarrely clean up this house.
I really interpreted it. I felt that was very meaningful and so lovely, non-dialogue delivered content, and it was love to me.
Yeah, in a way,
even with the wife character taking the food and putting it in the sink, especially for a man to do that
at the time.
It felt so tender and kind of considerate or something.
And it's the kind of sort of cinematic ideas that I like cleaning the house after his mother died. I like that idea because it's the kind of thing people be like, oh, you should just cut that out,
Yeah. Wait, why was the back of the house gone?
It just decayed.
Wow. Okay. That was beautiful and strange and like metaphoric or something. I just felt like, okay, he had like an X-ray on her now or something.
And the sort of see-throughness of it, the fact that it was so weak. And I love this detail from the design work on that house that in Kentucky, in that period, the walls did not have seams. So there was always a gap. And so the wind always got in and dust always got in. And there was they were never fully solid. There was always an aspect of them that felt like they could fall apart.
Yeah. Tell me just like the love story between the two of them. It's so... what's the word? It's like this deep brew that doesn't traffic in kind of like the easy ways we see a relationship in films, like a love relationship all the time. There's like these beautiful lovemaking scenes, but it was just so many kind of long looks at each other and so many like vibes between each other. And it was an interesting way to portray love, especially between two men at that time. Like, how did that come about?
Because I've made a few different films about the nature of queerness, I guess, or love relationships between same-sex couples. Mm-hmm. And I've done the version where I've done like the repressive shame and the coming of age and the horror of all of that.
Yeah.
And my second film was about a middle-aged man who's repressed and develops a desire for a younger man, and that all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And then before I made this, I'd made this TV show in England where I think I shot like 75 orgies across 3 episodes. And so I sort of came into the issue of sound, sort of wanting to make something that was about the other aspect of relationships, which is the sort of the connection, and they connect over music at a piano in a bar, and it's sort of enough. It's like everything. And in the short story, the sex scene, they go home and there's this thing with the water, which I really loved. And then for me, the kind of intimate moment is the next morning when Paul's character is going around his apartment and kind of absorbing all of his things, but it's the moment of sort of falling in love in some way. It's the certainty that this is somebody he's not going to be able to move beyond.
Yeah. I've found really effective and hard to pull off. Like, so yes, they're playing music together and that's kind of an easy connection, but it's just like the looks and the air between them was sort of like lit up. And
we all hope that that's the way we fall in love.
Or you hope that that's what the director and 2 actors can pull off on screen. Okay, tell me about the spitting water scene. How did that come about? Felt sort of improvised or something. Felt surprising.
It was in the short, and then obviously in the script. And day one of shooting, and I think really good icebreaker for them, but because they found it really funny, and it was weirdly technically challenging. Because at the beginning, Josh just kind of sort of tripled down his own shirt, and I think I just like those kinds of ideas in films where something like sort of like strange like that can happen, and it's sort of like what is the logic of it? Like he decides to spit water into somebody else's face, but somehow it feels right. It feels appropriate to like the sort of end of that night, the sort of like the liberation that comes out of being alone finally in some kind of safe space, and this kind of introduction of some kind of intimacy.
Yeah.
In 1917. So
yeah. Well, it made me really curious about Josh's character right away.
Exactly.
Like who does that?
Yeah, it's pretty confident, and you also want to get the sense that was who he is, and then you also want to get the sense of who he is when he comes back from the war.
Right. So the kind of from that, and just in general, all their conversations, especially the conversations towards the end where they visit the island with the ex-slaves, and the kind of beginning of their breakup, I guess. So even when they're having turmoil, they're having problems, they're having like a lack of communication, they don't have like shame, like kind of like what you said before. They're very kind of confident in their sexuality and their connection. Even if they're disconnecting, I found that great and interesting.
It seems like, there's so much period work films about queer relationships, and I grew up with these kinds of films. I remember like back to when I was a teenager in South Africa, there was like a deluge of films that came into the country at the end of apartheid.
Yeah,
it's a very strange. I was that exact teenager. I was 13 when everything changed, and it was kind of insane because suddenly there was like McDonald's.
Yeah.
But there was also movies, and there were the multiplexes, and it was just this overload of culture and product. And one of those things was, for some reason, it was so popular in South Africa, was merchant ivory movies.
Yeah.
And they sort of came in like in a wave.
Yeah.
And so I remember seeing Maurice, and there was a sort of like coding idea of like, okay, so this relationship between these two men, the problem here is their sexuality. The problem here is that they can't live this normal life in quoted terms, because it's not the way of this Victorian society. And so the tension in this story is the fact that they love each other. They're all the right ingredients for happiness or human bondage in some way, but the world does not allow it.
Yeah.
And so I've seen, obviously there's been so many other films, but I remember later on, when I was later teens, I saw Happy Together.
Yeah.
And it was the first film where they did the same thing, where the tension wasn't the sexuality of the two characters. It was the fact that they were just trying to work out if they could be together or not because of each other.
Yeah.
And yes, they were in South America, and it was confusing.
Yeah.
But I loved the fact that it was also somewhat liberated from this question of shame or this question of identity being the problem. And then obviously movies like Brokeback Mountain are being this sort of big Hollywood film, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah.
It sort of commercializes or made stories of a gay couple seem kind of like more accessible. But again, at the core of it was the fact that they could fundamentally not be together.
There's like the societal trauma story of the queer story.
And I think about it as like a young queer person growing up, like if you have all the narrative you're getting through cinema or stories is like you're going to face this problem of who you are is going to be in conflict with what you want. And so it was kind of nice to read this short story and just sort of the way that because when you make enough gay movies, they start sending you a lot of gay movies. And so I would get lots of scripts. And so when this came around, I was like, oh, here we go again. Another, like, you're going to read it, they're going to fall in love, and then somebody's going to get lynched. And and so it was nice that like the way that the setup happened, this moment with the water and the first night together and the certainty of the intimacy. There was no fear in each of the characters.
Yeah. That was really lovely. It did that his grandfather fought in the Civil War, kind of did have this really interesting 19th century kind of hangover or shadow across this 20th century story. And I always think of like gay stories in the 19th century that we don't really know a lot about, or like a Walt Whitman world is so much more sort of passively queer or just queer living alongside. Yeah. And I felt like you were sort of drawing from that and like you're taking from a deeper history.
And just from a pure filmmaking point of view, I sort of was going like, I'd love to make a movie where for an audience, a contemporary queer audience, that there's some kind of some other offering about a historical piece of queer narrative. Yeah. I think that's the sort of, that might be the kind of great moment of where we are, where you can make a film like this, where you don't feel like, oh, the big, most important story I have to tell about my identity or the identity of the community I'm a part of is what we're suffering through. Yeah. It's more so just making a story that is relevant to us, but not having to defend ourselves to a sort of assumedly heteronormative society.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like I found each film I made bit me in the ass in a different way and gave me gifts in a different way. Like certain things I learned are like, oh, that was easy this time, or that was kind of like a gift, a moment of grace. And then, wow, this polar bear I didn't see really came and took my leg, do you have either side of that with this film? Like something that was unexpectedly really hard or something that was unexpectedly growing and new?
I mean, because I was coming to the United States to make it, I sort of assumed that everything would be kind of hard. Yeah. It was like, I wasn't bringing a lot of my own team. I was bringing no one really. I was bringing my editor from London, and the composer Oliver Coates. He also lives in England. He could work remotely. So I was expecting things to be really tough. But I think what was really great about this experience was a fantastic team of people, a really generous team of people in New York and New Jersey who were very good at teaching me and helping me and sort of initiating me. And so that was like surprisingly easy. And then I think what was...
Even in the union world and in the States, that didn't...
I mean, I had to learn all of that very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so fascinating to work in multiple countries because in South Africa, we don't have unions really, but we also, it's like a service industry company. So you have these horror stories of like shoot days that go into the 18, 19 hours and the crew are just thrilled because it's just overtime pay. Yeah. And they don't think about the idea of like, I will be exhausted if I do this continuously for 6 weeks or whatever. Yeah. Because it's not as frequent. And then you go to England and, if you don't do tea time, people go nuts. And and it's sort of the thing of like, do they actually have tea? Probably not. They're just smoking cigarettes whilst sitting on their phones. Yeah. And then that's like a cultural thing that you have to get used to. And then coming to the US, like, I was deeply fascinated by this simple thing, which is that the clock doesn't start ticking on lunch until the last person. Yep. And I kept going like, how will we know? And apparently there is a system of, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah. It is a fascinating, weird workplace with so many weird histories. What you said before about like walking around the set early, getting there early, I love doing that myself and kind of feeling it. It sounds like it's a very intuitive process for you. And kind of often I have to feel the space and then kind of like see how I want to shoot it. But it's a very like in your gut kind of thing. And I don't do storyboards either. So like, is it the whole thing very intuitive for you? And like you're relying on your body to tell you, or?
I've come to know that I work in a slightly organic way where I do evolve it as I go, which makes making television really complicated because they don't like things to change. Yeah. But I do, because the set's only fully dressed on that day, right? You might go there the day before and they're still doing things. So you're only really getting a sense of like what is around in the scene and the production design of it all on the day. Yeah. And I mean, there are moments, for example, one morning we were setting up in the farmhouse in Kentucky and the natural sunlight was coming through the door. And I just called Paul on his phone. He was in hair, makeup, whatever. And I was like, I don't care what you're wearing. Just run over here right now. And saw him running like down a street with the hair, makeup people chasing him behind him. Yeah. Because I was like, come now, we'll just do this thing. And I just wanted him to sleep in the light shaft.
Oh yeah, that shot. Yeah.
And so I like to be able to do those kinds of things. I like to be able to sort of, and then of course it's a bit of panic for everyone because it's not in the schedule.
Yeah.
We were planning something else to start that moment. The actor's wearing whatever, he has to go back. But I don't want to lose those moments. And so,
do you think that comes from a still photography background?
I think so. I think I think visually in those ways sometimes, and I like to be able to create that way. I don't know if you have this where you could also start a scene and then somehow feel like you're run aground in terms of the way it's blocked or the way you're photographing it, and then want to sort of just start over.
Yeah.
But you also have to have the freedom to be able to like take the 5 minutes to be like, okay, what is it that I don't like about this, or why doesn't this work? And sometimes you all feel it, like even the actors are like, it's not quite what we.
Yeah.
I think that there's this assumption that is when you're making a film that you have to be so prepared. We are super prepared all the time, but there should be the freedom to kind of,
Yeah. I love that. I like to try to get ahead, and then on Friday reshoot that I did earlier.
Oh, I mean, the director of Sentimental Value, I just saw him in Telluride, and he was like, they shot for 64 days.
Yeah, that's cheating.
That's cheating.
Okay, last question. Hopefully this is a good one. Let's say that like you have this all set, and you're in prep, and you got your actors and everything's ready, but boom, for some reason you can't do this film. What would have you really lost? What would you have missed? What in you would have been like, I needed to do that?
If I couldn't do this movie?
Yeah. What if you couldn't have done this movie?
That's a really hard question because it became such like an obsession. It just felt like I felt very much that this was the first thing I'd read, or the sort of opportunity to make a film where I could explore this idea of maybe it's because I'm older. I feel like when I was younger, in my 20s, I started making movies that were quite aggressive about identity or about politics or about, characters who were in this like sort of very particular complicated places. And this felt like the first thing I was going to make where I was older, and it felt like it was going to be a lot more of an embrace. And I needed that. I needed to be able to make it felt like the end of a series of movies about queer people. I'm sure I'll take a break from the queer people from this point on. But it was it felt like an end of something. And so it became a little panic because it was taking so long to finance, and Paul and Josh kept getting older. And so it was like, we can't, before they both turn 49, we've got to try and make this movie. So.
Yeah. Well, that was good. Ending, I think. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying around.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.